Hey, everybody, this is Barbara. Yes, we certainly had the giggles. Thank you all for joining us. I'm the youth coordinator at Camp Rehoboth, and this is a panelist made up of us. I will be leaving as well. I'm going to be introducing Wesley Ingram. He is a transgender peer advocate from Newark, Delaware. He recently graduated from University of Delaware for a psychology degree. Wesley also works with NAMI as the program manager. Not only that, Wesley did not give him enough credit. He has done really a phenomenal job working with the youth as well as young adults. Just Persevere has done a tremendous job with myself and Sal and Camp Rehoboth statewide. So kudos, thank you, Wes. So no further ado, I'm going to be leaving. Wes will be the moderator. That's it. And yes, we do have giggles. We always have fun. So ciao.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I'm Wes. My pronouns are he, him, his. And as said, I am a trans man from Delaware. And I work with NAMI Delaware in an official role and Camp Rehoboth in a sort of more unofficial role. And so without further ado, I will introduce my fellow panelists. Tonight we have Evelyn with her, and her pronouns are she, her. Grayson, he, him, his pronouns. Julian, they, them, their pronouns. And Edward, he, him, his pronouns. And so I will get started with our first question. For all of our panelists, what would you like a new friend to know about you? And is there a question that you would maybe like them to ask you to get to know you a little bit better?
I can start off. Hi, my name's Julian. Like Wes said, I use they, them pronouns. One thing that I would like a new friend to know about me is that I love having conversations. I love talking to people, that they can like text me or ring me like almost any time of the day, and I will absolutely have a conversation with you. I just love talking about stuff. And one question I would want people to ask is what I'm listening to. I almost always have music or podcasts going, and that's one of the things that I like to talk about is what I'm listening to. Yeah.
I can go ahead and answer it next. So yeah, as Wes said, I'm Grayson, he, him pronouns. I am a recent college grad. For me, what I would like a new friend to know about me is that I guess I'm shy at first, but I actually am a open book kind of person. You just kind of have to like get through the quiet shyness when you first meet me. And one question that I would want a new friend to ask me is, what was your biggest adventure in life? Because I actually have done a lot of things, and I feel like that would be a really fun conversation starter.
I can go next. My name's Edward. I use he, him pronouns. Something that, I generally like new friends to know about me is that, like Grayson, I am very shy generally, but I tend to, when I get to know someone, I tend to talk to them a lot and excessively. And I like having open conversations. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
I can go next. Okay. Hi, I'm Evelyn. My pronouns are she, her, hers. as Wes already stated. And something I would want new people to know about me is maybe that I'm very outgoing, and no matter who you are, I'm going to talk to you like I've known you my entire life. And so you can expect me to always start conversations and stuff and talk a lot about my interests. And that would probably be my question too. I would want people to ask me what I'm interested in because it changes for me like every 2 or 3 days. And I love talking about myself. So, yeah.
Thanks so much, panelists. And I love that we are all enjoy talking despite what's possibly our initial view may seem. So our second question is for whoever would like to answer it. What would you feel that the biggest identifier was for you that helped you realize your gender identity?
I can, I guess, kind of start on this question. So for me, and I noticed this before, before I realized I was trans. It took me a few years after I realized it for me to kind of realize I was trans, but clothing is a big one for me. I really always growing up, and even once I was kind of grown, hated women's like very feminine clothing. So dresses, skirts, my mom would have to force me into them if she could. And it was kind of a, I guess, like huge changing point for me when I started wearing suits. And I got very comfortable, and I didn't realize that people are actually, you can enjoy dressing up in fancy clothing. I always just thought everyone hated it as much as I did. And after like a few years, it kind of dawned on me that that was a huge identifier for me as to why, like, as to, okay, I'm trans, and was just how really uncomfortable I was in very feminine clothing. And then another identifier for me was my hair. It's very short now, but it used to be very long, and my whole 20 years of having long hair, every single day, once I learned how to do it, would put it in a ponytail, and I wouldn't take it out ever. And I just kind of wanted to hide it. And then once I got my hair cut, I was like, oh, I love this. So, yeah.
I can go next. This is probably not the most straightforward answer, but for me, one thing that helped me realize my gender identity was like learning to unlearn things. I feel like we unknowingly internalize a lot of stuff about gender as we're growing up and even as adults. And it took me until, probably around like age 21 to really come to terms with how I wanted to see myself as myself and not just a reflection of what other people wanted to see in me. It helped to like stop dating for a while and to stop sort of like hinging what I thought I should look like on what other people found attractive, and just, recognizing that like who I am might not be as attractive as other people would like me to be, but that really isn't what matters.
I do want to add too, just because I have an identifier, one of many that I feel like is just very eye-opening for me. When I was in middle school, I actually got reprimanded, and the teacher had to like call a parent-teacher conference because I refused to put my birth name on anything, and I would only put the name of the male celebrity that I was going by. Like, I had this like whole friend group, and we were all into kind of like the same bands and stuff. So we would call each other by like our favorite like guys in the bands and everything. And so that's the name that I would always put on my work. And they were like, you kind of can't keep doing that, you know. We're gonna start not giving you credit if you don't start putting your real name on things. And I was like, oh no. And it's just really funny to me to look back because I didn't come out until I was almost 21. So that was so many years to come, but just how, you know, how young already that I was starting to present with certain like gender dysphoria things. So would anyone else like to answer the question, or would we do we want to move on to the next one?
Can I just bounce off of that real quick? Because that kind of reminded me of a memory. When I was younger and with my dead name, there was kind of a shortened nickname version of it that I started going by. I thought in like middle school into high school, and in high school I really started using it, and then in college it was all I used. I found a year ago a card that I wrote for my mom when I must have been at least like 6 at the oldest, because it was hand drawn, horribly drawn card for Mother's Day, and I signed it with that nickname. And like looking back and seeing that, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even realize that I was like identifying with these things at such an early age.
I could also just like bounce off of that. I did the same thing. I started going by a shortened androgynous version of my name. And that was one of the things that helped me realize I actually came out as transgender at 16, but it took a long time to really realize what that meant for me. Yeah.
Okay, so our next question is, what does pride mean for you as a trans person?
I think I came up with this question, so I'll answer it first. Pride for me means being unapologetic. It means, you know, doing what feels best for me, regardless of what other people think about that. And it means not letting people step all over me or enforce their ideas of who I am onto me. That's pride for me.
Do we want me to call on people, or do we just want to head on to the next question? I want to give everybody a space to answer if they would like, but I also don't want to force people to answer.
I can go ahead. I just wanted to give like space in case other people wanted to answer it too. For me, I guess kind of similar to Julian, being very open and honest about my identity. I think one of the things that I've found definitely in the last year, like talking to my family members and kind of explaining a lot of it to them, is that the more I talk about my experiences and the more open I am about it and the more information I give out about it, the more people there are who understand it and who can kind of explain even just little bits of it to like people around them, and like the kind of ripple effect that it causes. So for me, it's always been about, you know, being open, being honest, and also I would say showing that I guess I can do anything that anyone else can do. And I've always kind of been that type of person where like I want to be able to show that I'm just as strong as a cis man, or like I can do, you know, anything that, you know, anyone else might be able to do, because I think that's kind of the best way of showing that, for me at least, that like as a trans man, my pride in who I am.
I can also answer this question if you want. For me, kind of like what Julian said, it's like pride for me is like owning my own identity without feeling the need to like explain myself to people who don't understand it, or like without a desire for acceptance, and being able to live as myself, not only tolerated but celebrated in a world full of people who maybe aren't the same as me. But yeah.
For me as well, like pride is also a way, like for me personally, I find that being out about myself and talking about myself openly is also a way to help people who can't necessarily be out about themselves and can't necessarily have those conversations.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what all of you guys said. And I did want to add too, because when I saw this question, my first thought was pride, as in, it's June and Pride Month and actual, like, pride parades and pride events and things like that. And so the only thing that I will want to add is that, pride for me is also remembering that we, as in trans people, the trans community has always been a part of pride. Even if we've never been acknowledged until much more recently. And so just keeping that in mind, especially if there's ever any certain spaces that make us feel maybe less welcome or unwelcome in comparison to the rest of the, LGBT community, that, it's really important that we exist, that, our community is, has been at the forefront along with our LGBT siblings and everything. So, I think now that's really important to remember. Our next question is, how can we better support trans students? And I think this was also written kind of with both high school and college in mind. So we can go with whichever experience is works better for us.
Do you want to go first?
You can go. I was waiting a second.
Alrighty. So as someone who just came out of high school and didn't really see a lot of support for trans students in my high school, and now going into a college that is very supportive of genderqueer people, I really like how, for the most part, my college is handling people with like their dead names versus their actual names that they go by, and bathroom situations. And I feel like if it isn't that hard for a small college to do, it shouldn't be that hard for a high school to do that's like roughly like the same size. So like, I mean, in high school, a lot of teachers don't necessarily ask you, hey, what names do you prefer to go by? They just assume, because, they might not necessarily see a lot of out trans people, but that doesn't mean you don't exist and that we're not there. And I also really think that there should be like more support for students in dealing with like bathroom situations and stuff too, because I mean, for me, it was just, you can go to the nurse's office, but what happens if the nurse's office is all the way across the school from where all of your classes are?
For me, I kind of think of two things. First, kind of going off of what Ed was saying. So, I recently graduated college, in high school, I actually went to a private boarding school, so I have a bit different of an experience. But they took steps for sure. And at the time, I wasn't out, but I did have a friend. And it was a very small school, so at the time, there were, I think, 2 or 3 people that I knew were trans or non-binary in the school, and they were all my friends. And um, their experiences were kind of mixed. They would allow you to kind of do more masculine dress code, but we kind of had to push for it first. And they even offered for one of my friends to actually dorm in the boys' dorm if he was comfortable. But it kind of didn't work out. So they were really good on those fronts. And then there were kind of other fronts where the school and kind of the administration were not as good. And so for that, it was sports, which I have kind of been in sports a lot throughout my life, and I was a college athlete as well before I transitioned. And so one of the problems at high school was that my friend actually, he wanted to play on the football team, and the schools, the like sports league that we were in with the other schools, their rule was if there is an equivalent team for, let's say if there's like a soccer team, if you have only a boys team, then girls can play on the boys team. But if there's a girls team as well, then girls have to play on the boys team and boys have to play on the boys team. And or girls have to play on the girls, yeah. And so there's football, and football doesn't really have an equivalent. And the league said that field hockey was the equivalent for girls, which is a completely different sport entirely. They're both very different sports, and actually around the world, they both have men's and women's leagues for the same sport. And so they said if he was to play football, he would never be allowed to play a varsity football game because he was technically, in their eyes, a girl and was trying to play a boys sport when there was a girl's equivalent. So, I just kind of think about that and how like there's a lot of bills right now about trans students in sports, and it doesn't make any sense. As kind of a former athlete, I could go into a lot of the science behind why there are no advantages for the trans athletes. I won't bore everyone with it, but I think one thing that definitely still obviously needs to be improved, because this year there's a lot of bills going into place banning trans athletes, is that you need to be way more inclusive with sports, especially with high school. And as far as the NCAA is concerned with college, they already have their rules in place for how trans students can be included into sports. Like if I wanted to play on the men's team at my college, I could have. I just decided not to. So yeah.
I can add sort of from like the college experience that I think one of the things that we need to remember when we're talking about accommodating transgender students is that being transgender overlaps with other identities as well. Like I am someone who needed certain accessibility things for my housing, but also had issues with my housing because all of the bathrooms were gendered. So I needed specifically to have a single room with an ensuite bathroom. And it was a nightmare trying to get that. There was like 2 weeks where I was stuck in a room without a shower. Actually, I lived 12 minutes away from the school I went to. I went home to shower. And just like being more aware that like those things can overlap and that people have other needs that interact with that sort of thing. And that, we need to also, like one of the issues that I've talked about with my college experience is that most of the unisex bathrooms are also like single stall disability access bathrooms. And so you're sort of creating this artificial competition between people who need the handicap access and people who need the unisex access. And that solution could be fixed by making more bathrooms unisex and making more bathrooms handicap accessible. There were multiple times where I almost like peed myself waiting for someone to get out of the bathroom. And if there had been more bathrooms, like that wouldn't have been an issue. I wouldn't have had to leave a building I was in, go to the building next to it, go up the stairs, use the bathroom, and then go back to the building to join the class. And it ends up taking 10 minutes out of a 40-minute class. And so, yeah, I second like the bathroom issue, because I think there's often like, oh, well, UD has like 63 unisex bathrooms, but that's only a third of the buildings, and half of those are not public access. So actually 1/6 of the buildings at UD have a public access bathroom. That's not good, you know? So even just thinking of it from like a numbers perspective, you know, we definitely need to do work on the bathroom issue for sure.
I can answer this question too from like a high school perspective. I think that all of our teachers should be better prepared for like kids who have different pronoun needs and stuff. Because I remember as a story, one time in class, when this was like just when I started like changing my name on everything, on my papers and stuff, my teacher would like, if they messed up my name, they would like make a big deal out of it and make it all about them. Like, oh, I'm so sorry that I'm having trouble with this. It's so hard for me. And then like my whole class was looking at me and I felt really embarrassed. And just like, if you mess up pronouns, like teachers should know this of all people because they have to deal with kids all the time who are constantly growing and changing. Like, don't just ask. If you don't know, just ask. But also they should know like how to deal with that. They should be trained first. They should be able to just quickly change names on stuff without making it a big deal. And they should know how to, if they mess up pronouns, how to get past it quickly just by apologizing instead of drawing it out and just making it more of a big deal than it needs to be. For peers, I think they could just make it easier if for their trans classmates, friends, by just like offering support, offering to walk them down the hallway if they need it, like to the bathroom or something, and to just like not ask harmful questions or invasive questions about their life before transition because it's really none of anyone's business. But yeah, just everyone being more respectful. They should know how to do that in schools. So
If I could just like piggyback off of that one. I don't know if we're going too long on this question. Okay. I didn't think about the peer perspective, and I think one thing for the peer perspective definitely was in college, we had some trouble with our IT department getting the right names on emails, and like your email in college is typically, you know, your name and then like your school, like whatever. And I had emailed the IT department to get access to something for someone else in the LGBTQ plus club. He was trans at the time. The IT department hadn't even told us that there was an option for trans students to change the name on their emails. So I sent his direct email, which had his dead name on it. And I said in the email, this is his name. And they sent back an email headlining it, like directing it towards his dead name, saying, "Dear dead name, this is how you get access to this." And I went into the IT department and I reamed them out. I was pretty mad. It happened during my class. I went in and right after class and I yelled at them and I was like, you need to pay attention to what we're saying in these emails, because you haven't given us an option to change the names on the emails. And so I would say one thing for peers is always stand up for each other. Even, even if you're not, obviously I'm also trans, and so I know how harmful it was, but you should always just stand up for your trans and your non-binary peers, and really any of your peers in general, regardless of who it is, because they apologized a lot, and then next semester there was an option to change your email, so it does create change.
All of that was super important, so thank you guys. Our next question is, what are your hopes for the future as a young person? And Grayson kind of started this already, but how are you going to create the change that you want to see? What are those steps that you guys are taking or want to take in the future?
Personally, as someone who just became an adult, I am looking more into politics and stuff like that, and laws people want to pass, and things that the people who are representing us stand for. And me personally, I'm interested in like talking with those people and like protesting against people who want to put harmful laws and stuff in place. And I mean, I also want to see a lot of the laws that are good for us being enforced, because a law only goes so far.
I think that it's really important for young trans people to see older trans people like, getting careers and, living a life, because I'm sure like a few of us, if not all of us, felt at some point like being trans meant that we were going to have no future or a very hard future. And it is certainly the case that being trans doesn't make things easier for you. But I think that like my plan is to pursue my PhD and become a professor, be able to be like an out professor that students can talk to. It was cool having gay professors in college. That was awesome. I met Wes at in a class. It was LGBT literature. Yeah, I walked in and I saw him and I was like, that looks like someone I'll get along with. I sat next to him. But just like seeing, someone that you can like look up to. Not that like people should really be looking up to me. I'm not sure I'm the perfect role model, but just being able to see someone and be like, they went through, such and such, sort of like, because you think about like PhDs and professorship, it's something that's like pretty, gate kept. It's something that definitely the academic world has a lot of issues with, being very cisgender and very straight and very white and all those other things. And, I don't think I'm going to change the system from within it. I'm just one person. But if I could just make, some students have more hope for their future, that would make me really happy.
If nobody else has anything to mention, I did want to say that I feel very similar to Julian, where I know that when I was growing up, I didn't really know like even in the media, I feel like there wasn't a whole lot of talk about it or anything. I didn't have even really a celebrity to look up to. I mean, I feel like there was like maybe Chaz Bono that people like whispered about, and that was it. And I wasn't a huge Cher fan. I'm sorry. So, but as a part of my job, I get to talk to high schoolers. I get to, well, previously before coronavirus was going to high schools and talking to, you know, and occasionally middle schools about not just LGBT things, but also just in general mental health. And I just felt like, you know, it was always so empowering, and that I was able to do that, even if it is just something that's just like local to whatever schools that would have us talk at, and in Delaware and whatnot, like, you know, being able to be that person that's like an out trans man and, you know, visible in some way, in some small way. And that, you know, I did get like parents and, you know, students and whatnot would occasionally come up and talk to me about that, and, you know, disclose like their own, you know, confusion about gender or what their children were going through. And it just made me feel really, really good. And that I was kind of being that person that I wish I could have seen when I was younger. So, and I think that's all that a lot of us could really hope for, you know. So any final words on this, or would we like to move on to our final question? Okay, so our final question is, what advice would you give to someone starting on their gender journey?
Be curious, you know, be open to the possibilities. Don't feel like you need to have a label. Like, labels are good, and if you find one that fits you, that's awesome. But it's okay not to have one. And you don't owe anyone an explanation of where you are in your journey or what you at the moment conceive of your gender to be. You know, it you like, the world is your oyster, your gender oyster. And just, you know, like, also have fun with it, you know, playing around with gender expression and like trying out names, trying out pronouns, seeing what fits. Like, that can be a really rewarding experience. And even if you know, experiment and end up going back to something that you had in an earlier time, like, that's okay, you know. You are who you say you are at the moment you say you are, and no one else can tell you differently.
I could go next. I also, for advice, I would want to say, like, don't like not use pronouns that you think you would feel comfortable with because you think someone else is gonna have a problem with it. Don't like consider maybe using she they, but then not doing it because you think your coworkers are gonna like get mad at you. Like, no one, like, it's not any of their business. And if it makes you comfortable, then change your pronouns or name to whatever you want. It doesn't matter what other people think.
I would also recommend, if you can, to research things if you are able to. And if you have the resources of talking to other, or to talking to trans people or gender queer people, to go out and just say, hey, like, can I talk to you about your experiences?
I would say, and I guess this one's kind of similar to Julian, but you don't have to know it all right away. You don't. I kind of felt a little like pushed into having to answer a bunch of questions I didn't know how to answer when I first came out, and that was partially because I was in I was outed to some people, and so I kind of had to like answer questions I wasn't ready for. But you don't have to have all the answers, and it's okay, because honestly, I didn't know a lot of answers that to questions I had for myself, let alone questions that other people were asking me. And I'd also say, oh shoot, now I'm forgetting it. Lean on the people that you trust, and like know who you trust. Because on one hand, like one person I leaned on that I thought I trusted, ended up outing me. So obviously I couldn't trust them as much as I thought. And like looking back, I probably should have known that, based on prior behavior by that person. But you know, on the flip side, my best friend at the time, and now my girlfriend, I trust her with the world, and I trusted her from the moment that I literally realized I was trans in front of her. And she helped me, be comfortable and take my time with things. And so, I knew I could lean on her, and I still know I can lean on her. And that is somebody who helped me through my entire transition and is still helping me through it. And so it's all about just, who you can trust deep down. And if you lean on them, you won't be disappointed by the people that, who you trust.
One thing also that I can add, I absolutely agree with Grace and Ed to like talk to people that you trust, and especially if you have trans people that that you trust, like definitely talk to them. But like there's also a lot of media made by trans people about these sort of journeys. Find that sort of stuff. Find the stuff that is written by trans people about themselves. And like sometimes it's stuff that people don't immediately think trans stuff. Like Stone Butch Blues has been a really important book to a lot of trans masculine people that I know. And just find that sort of stuff, library databases, the internet. I know saying that makes me sound like an old man, but yeah, those sort of things are out there. And you can maybe find little pieces of yourself in someone else's journey that can help guide you or put you on a path to further realization.
I'd also add, it's okay to be scared, because I was terrified, and like, I guess kind of along the lines of like not knowing the answers to questions. But I was pretty scared that maybe, I was like not figuring out things the way I thought it was, or, I was wrong or something like that. Like I was missing something, and it's okay to be scared. It You get through it, and you find that kind of confidence in your identity.
Yeah, I don't know if I can really add anything. All of those were really great answers, so thank you again. That was our final question that we had, but I do see that there are some questions people have been asking in the Q&A in the chat, so I'm going to pull those up now. Our first question from our attendees is, how do you cope with getting misgendered? And if nobody is really sure how to answer that question, I can start first. for me, it's more about kind of, managing my own anxiety and everything. It's really great to have friends who are really supportive, as we were just saying, having those really trusted friends who are with you and who get it, who you can sort of go to for reassurance. I think it's totally okay to ask your friends when you're having a bad, day. Maybe you got misgendered a bunch of times, just to ask them, hey, can you refer to me, like, can you gender me correctly in our interaction? Can you use a gendered word that would make me feel good, in the next few sentences? And I think people are kind of hesitant to do that because it's literally asking for attention or anything like that. But I think in those moments, that's what friends are for. And you should definitely lean on them in that respect. If you're able to, and just keeping an eye on that anxiety, making sure that you're doing things for yourself and you're not just thinking about, oh, these are all the reasons why they misgendered me and things like that. Getting out of your head and making sure that you're doing the things that you need to do to take care of your mental health is just what I keep in mind when I'm feeling, a little bit down, and those things, still happen, even, to me. So.
Yeah, for me, it kind of depends on the space. If it happens uh, like currently I work at like a grocery store, and so when I first, like earlier on, started, I was getting misgendered there a lot, and it really gave me a lot of anxiety about work, and just like I would avoid customers entirely. And like slowly over time I've gotten misgendered less, kind of as I move forward and transition, and I guess find my own confidence. And so I do think that it's a lot of like handling anxiety and handling the dysphoria and kind of working through your own coping mechanisms for both. If it is like you just need to avoid customers all day, then, I mean, it's not the best solution, but it was my solution at the time, to just kind of hide in the back room for a while and like get a hold on like, okay, I'm fine. It was just that one customer, and, it's not going to happen every time. Um, in other spaces, it might happen, and I might just get kind of annoyed or angry that day, like not actually, I guess, as harmful for me, but more just like an annoyance. And I guess in that moment, I just kind of try to let it go and walk away from it. And there have definitely been times where it's just been a really just like, I, I guess like a bug that you just want to kind of swat off your shoulder. Like, come on, just you really had to do that to me on a day when I'm grumpy. Um, so yeah, just kind of handling it in the different forms that it shows up.
I still live with my family, my parents and 3 sisters. So I'm gonna like combo some of these questions of misgendering and family. One of the things that I've found is helpful is just like sort of like gentle reminders. Like they them pronouns were definitely an adjustment for my family. Like I said, I came out when I was 16, but I didn't actually start using they them pronouns until I was 20. Um, it took a while. um, and so like it was very much a new experience. Pretty much no one in my family had had the experience of referring to someone with they them pronouns. And like one of like a good example of kind of what I'm talking about is we have a dog. His name is Chewy. He's very cute. And sometimes my parents will be like, I'll be like playing with the dog and they're like, oh, is she being mean to you? And I'm like, yes, they are. And they're like, oh, yes. Something like that, where it's just like, I'm not really being like, no, it's just sort of like, I'm sort of speaking in third person about myself. Like I'm still continuing the conversation, but just making sure that they have a reminder that like, yeah, you use the wrong pronoun, but I still get what you're saying. And, you know, yeah, I'm having fun. I'm playing with the dog. It's true. You know, so that's sort of like, I don't know how well that would translate to like the workplace or like non-family sort of stuff. Um, I don't get out very often. I'm immunosuppressed, so like trying to leave the house right now is like a nightmare. But yeah, just sort of like finding ways to work it into conversation often helps people be less defensive because there's an inclination to just continue the conversation rather than sort of getting hung up on that. And, you know, if they could just casually correct themselves and continue the conversation, like it allows them to, you know, practice, you know, gendering you in the correct way.
I can answer the how was your experience coming out to your parents and family too. If we, Wes, do we want to move on to that one?
Yeah, I was just about to, I was just pulling it up now. If there were no more comments on particularly misgendering, although I do want to mention too, just going off of what Julian was saying, I am kind of the non-confrontational person who just kind of lets the conversation continue on. Kind of, so, you know, for peers as well as just allies, I found that, you know, my friends and coworkers who, you know, have spoken up and overheard me being misgendered and said, actually, you know, or, oh, he said this, you know, and whatnot, and kind of like casually corrected people kind of for me have been really, really helpful. And so, you know, for those people out there who have trans people in their lives that they interact with and are friends with and love and whatnot, that's a really solid way to show your allyship, especially when you know, like, they're kind of a more introverted or less confrontational kind of person. But yes, we can go on to our next. Oh, no. Did you want to ask something, Julian?
I was going to say, find your loudmouth friend like me.
Exactly. So our next Q&A question was, how was your experience with coming out to your parents and family? If anyone would like to share, because some stories can be a little bit more traumatic, so it's completely understandable if some people don't want to share about this particular topic.
I can start. There are definitely more, I guess, traumatic portions of mine that I won't go into details on. But for me, it sounds like it would be pretty easy because my brother, who's 8 years older than me, is gay, and he came out 8 years before. So first, I came out. I came out as a lesbian because I'm attracted to women, and I thought that I had kind of figured things out, and my family breezed through that one. There weren't many questions. There was like a little fight on my mom's half, just because I think a biggest part of it was just because I'm my mom's favorite, and so she really had like a hold on what she thought like my life would look like. Then then I started wearing suits and whatnot and kind of got more comfortable presenting more masculinely. And then in college, it kind of all finally clicked for me. And I realized that, I was trans, and I came out to my brother first because he's kind of the easy one to come out to. My brother and my brother-in-law too, because he was married at that point. They're both very supportive. My brother-in-law, especially, as like an outside view to my family and having his own story with his own family, was really nice to kind of connect with, because it was different from my brother's story and different from, different family. But yeah, so I came out as trans to my brother first, and my sister kind of took a little more time to understand. And then I actually was approached by one of my aunts, who asked me, without me kind of coming out to her. And I was really kind of, I guess, starved for an ally in the family at the time, because I was scared about talking to my parents. And so I told her, and we had a really long conversation. And I kind of took her as my ally. What I didn't know was that, like, over the next month, she would basically out me to the rest of the family. She told one of my other aunts, who then accidentally, that was an actual accident, told my third aunt, because I have a lot of aunts. And then, so kind of after those three knew, I came out to my parents, and unknowing that I had been outed to my aunts at that point. And I told my parents in their room, and my mom was kind of just like stone silent. Yeah, there was a cat. Sorry, she kind of distracted me for a moment. My mom was silent and like didn't speak at all. And my dad, like, the first words out of his mouth, I started sobbing in the middle of it. And I never cried like when I came out to them as gay. And so that's how I knew, like, oh wow, I really got it right this time, because I'm like sobbing as I'm just telling them here. And my dad's like immediately was just like, okay, we love you, I love you, and like gave me a hug, and he was really good about it. My mom didn't talk to me for a few days. And when I did kind of push her to talk to me about it, she said some things that weren't, definitely weren't supportive. And so it took a while with my mom. And in the process of, the few days of me kind of dealing with the aftermath of my mother, it came out that the same aunt who had told her siblings also told my grandfather, who is one of my favorite people. And that one I definitely think hurt the most. My grandpa, I never doubted would be supportive, and she said she had reasons to believe he would be unsupportive, but never gave me those reasons, so I don't think they exist. And so I didn't get that moment of coming out to my grandfather, which really hurt me. I did get to sit down with my grandpa after that and just kind of tell him from my side and have a good conversation with him. I'm lucky that my grandpa's white and my grandma's black, so they were a biracial couple at a time when being biracial was treated the same as being gay has been treated in recent years. And so they were both very supportive and very understanding every time that I came out or when my brother came out. And so I kind of had them on my shoulders. But my mom took a while. I think moms in general take a while. My dad at one point said that he was kind of just a sperm donor, which I don't think that's true, because my dad is actually like close relationship with my mom. Maybe that's a bit inappropriate, sorry. But like that was kind of my dad's joke, was that like he didn't have as I guess as deep of a connection as carrying your child for 9 months. So mom definitely struggled a lot. We didn't really talk about it. My mom doesn't love to talk about things, but she just kind of slowly started accepting it, because she was kind of forced to. Everyone else in the family took steps to accept it. I think as far as like name and pronouns goes, that also took a while. They all use the right name and use the right pronouns now, but there are definitely slip ups for sure. My grandma struggles with it, I think. But it really, for me, just took a long time of like pushing, I guess. I'm a very pushy person and I have a very pushy family, so I kind of have to push them. And one thing that I do, and I started doing a year ago to kind of push them to understand and to ask questions, was I write emails to them on a regular basis, like 1 week, 2 weeks apart, saying like, okay, here's a topic about being trans that you're going to read and you're going to listen and like understand. Because if they don't, and then they ask me that question in person, I say, listen, there's an email sitting in your inbox that you haven't read, so you can go read that because I'm not going to answer that question right now. And it really forces them to acknowledge and have conversations with me. And I've pushed them to take steps in the allyship as well. Like, I know somebody asked about, at work, I push my family to put their pronouns in their emails, in their social media, everywhere. I have pushed them from day one to do it. And I've actually had some aunts like email me and be like, how do I do that? And we talk about it. It's just a constant battle of, you have to answer a lot of questions, and it does definitely take time, even with the people who struggle the most. For me, at least, my mom does understand now. It just took her a long time. Sorry, that was long.
No, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Grayson. If nobody else wants to answer that specific question, I think I'm going to go a little bit out of order because I feel like there are two similar questions that go hand in hand with this question about coming out, and that I think maybe is a little bit easier for us to answer without having to get into specifics of our own coming out stories. Which is, there was a question, how would you have liked your parents to handle your gender when you were younger, or even now as you come out and are coming out or transitioning? And then there was also a question where it was asking about advice to parents. What advice would you give to parents of a young trans kid, as well as what are kind of the big things to advocate for them, specifically as they navigate like school and friends? But I think we can also look at this as just an overarching, as they, as if you're a parent of a trans kid, how is kind of like, what advice do we have, and how, what are kind of our tips on what best to advocate for them as they grow?
I'll go first. So definitely sort of, trying to collect my thoughts. A lot of times in, like, I've been working with some of my family members with this, where when they refer to me, sometimes they'll refer to me with pronouns or my dead name before I started transitioning. And as if like, when I was younger, that's a different person to who I am now. And they will refer to me, with all that sort of things. And like, I had an incident where like I was talking with some friends, and like family friends, and like my family were there, and we were like talking about like, school records, and my dad dead named me because like that was my name on my record at the time. And he was like, and I was like, Dad, don't do that. And he was like, well, that's the name that's there. And so I think it's very important, like when talking about pre-transitioning or like current or past records, to always remember that like your kid didn't changed. They are the same person. They just are using a name that suits them better and pronouns that suit them better than the pronouns and names that were given to them before. And like, as for advocating for your children in schools, I think it's important to let the schools know that, like, you know, like, your kids want to do this thing and it's beneficial for them to wear different uniforms than they are assigned to, or use different names than that's on their records, and that it does more good to them to go through these processes rather than forcing them to, you know, like, wear the male uniform and have their dead name given to them, because in the end, that's not good for their mental health.
I would say let them explore, especially when they're younger. If I had been allowed to wear the clothes I wanted to wear all the time when I was younger, I probably would have realized I was trans at a much earlier age. So let them explore, let them wear whatever they want. And if other parents or other people are saying, oh, well, you know, your kid's wearing a skirt or your kid's wearing, you know, a polo shirt and they should be in a dress, just be like, it's still formal. They're still dressed nice and it's not your kid. So, you know, just stand up to your kid, stand up for your kid, the way you would in every other sense, because you would stand up for your kid in every other sense, and you would let them explore. And the other thing I'd say from a, I guess, like, name change perspective, because you kind of made me think of it, is if they change their name, it's not because they don't like the name that you gave them. My dad struggled with my name, and my dad was really supportive, and he really struggled with it. And one thing that he said was like, I don't have much for my father left, but I have like the name that he gave me. And it's like, no, your kid has so much more than just the name that you gave them. They have the values that you taught them. They have, you know, if they're your biological child, they've got your eyes, they've got your, you know, nose, whatever. They've got, you know, everything that you taught them growing up, and they're the person that you taught them to be. So, you know, always remember that. And when it comes to schools, yeah, you just gotta stand up for them in general. Like, if they're pushing a uniform that, you know, your kid isn't comfortable in, say something. Be like, okay, time to change the uniform code, because you always let your kid explore, regardless of the space.
Similar to what Grayson was saying, try not to attach to a particular idea of who your child is. You know, one of the tough things for my parents is they were so used, because I have 3 sisters and I'm assigned female at birth. They were so used to referring to us collectively as the girls, and, you know, oh, I have 4 girls, or it's a family of all girls and stuff like that, that, like, you know, it's sometimes helpful to think of your child as being a little bit more independent from your idea of them, you know, like, just in the same way that you might think of a friend, like, of course, like, we all have influence on our children, and, you know, they are a part of your family for sure. Let them discover themselves and try really hard not to let your ideas of who they are sort of cloud your vision and cloud your love for them. You know, that was one of the toughest things with my parents is, you know, they clung on to the idea that we were girls because they actually wanted two boys when they started having kids. And what they initially got was four girls, and now they have me, a person who's somewhat masculine with no gender, and my sister who's a butch lesbian. It's like, that's the closest you're gonna get. Be happy with it.
This is Barbara from Camp Rehoboth. We have maybe time for one more question, Wes. If you want to, if there's one in the chat box and or the Q&A box.
Yes, I was just looking at that now. So I was just looking to see kind of what was the most applicable and that I think the most to all of us as panelists, and also what the attendees might get the most out of. So this question is specifically about workplace, but I also kind of want to open it up to being about school, you know, high school and college, because I think that that's also really applicable and important. So the question is, did any of you have issues feeling comfortable with your identities / pronouns in the workplace? And I don't want to read the whole question because it is a little bit long, and I don't want to put that person on the spot or anything with their own experiences that they mentioned. But the question also seems to be around, you know, how do you let people know what your pronouns are, especially if you're just beginning a transition, or if your pronoun, you know, or if you're non-binary and, you know, aren't doing what we would consider a traditional transition, you know, female to male or male to female is what I consider traditional, narratively speaking. How do you kind of talk about that without it being a huge deal? So, and I can start this one too, just to say that the first thing that I did was put my pronouns in the signature, kind of like what Grayson was saying in the emails. And honestly, just doing that and not even like, and I'm like as well as just being like an out trans man, but like just putting it in my signature, like slowly my coworkers started to do the same thing. And so while it's not all of my coworkers, just kind of seeing how like over the months that kind of spread to, you know, a few others, like I just felt like that was really impactful without it being like, hey, we should all be doing this thing, you know. So I'm a huge advocate for that.
This might be coming from me as being a very confrontational person, but I would go to whoever like your nearest higher up is and tell them first, like early on, if you're comfortable with that. Because I do believe that like culture is set at the top, and if the person over you and your coworkers is knowledgeable and supportive, like that allows for some accountability to happen in the workplace. And you know, there is a chance that it's, you know, find your coworkers that are. I in my experience, I was a figure model in college, and every time I had a new professor, I would, you know, come to the class early and like pull the professor aside and just be like, hey, so here's the deal. And I almost always got like positive reactions, and having the professor introduce me like with the correct name, with the correct pronouns, like set the sort of tone for the class. And there were very few cases of me being misgendered in that sort of work environment.
From a college perspective, I I come off very confrontational at first, but like I said, I can be pretty shy. And when I first started changing it in courses, I changed it like a few weeks into a semester. And so I had to kind of go to the professors at the beginning of the, like in the middle of the semester and be like, hey, I'm changing my name to this. But these, like, I had already been going by he, him pronouns at that point. But for me, because I had been confrontational for my friend and yelled at IT, IT automatically changed everything for me going into the next semester without me even knowing it. So it kind of made it easy for me, and it was, I guess, more of a big fish in a small pond where we're a small college, and I was a well-known person, and so it was kind of done for me. And then as I showed up to classes, I was expecting to have to say to the professor, and I'm not super confrontational, and I like when I first show up, and I am not early to classes, so I was just gonna let them call out the wrong name and then say something, and they called out the right name, and I was like, oh, this is a nice change. And then I looked on my canvas, and it was like, oh, IT changed it. For the workplace, I actually had a very awkward conversation on the phone today with what will be my new workplace about my legal name, because I'm still mid process. If you don't know, there are a lot of steps to it, and I'm like halfway there. And so I was like, I don't know if you need the old name. And my boss was kind of just like, we're just gonna go by Grayson because that's what you want to go by, and we'll figure it out from there, and I don't need to know it. So it's kind of just like having conversations, and that can be hard if you're not super comfortable with it. But I do think Julian's right with, like, it starts from the top down. One other option would just be to say it to your friends at work and have them start using, other pronouns, whichever pronouns you prefer, or, whichever pronouns are your pronouns. I shouldn't say prefer. And if you have multiple pronouns, maybe have them use the ones that are less common. And then as they have conversations with other people, it's kind of that ripple effect. It pushes out, and they can just kind of say for you, oh, well, their pronouns are this, to kind of make it so that if you're not confrontational, you don't have to have that confrontation or conversation.
Yeah, Grayson reminded me of when I came out in college. I did something similar where each semester before, like, I would just send out an email to whatever professors I was like going to see at, or like whatever was my next like semester of professors, and just being like, here's the deal. This is my name, these are my pronouns. And I think I still did that even after my legal name change, just because, the system isn't always that great. And in terms of that, even when you have kind of like the legal documents and whatnot. And then the other thing too is I'm not very confrontational about things, but like in the meetings, I don't necessarily correct people, but like if I'm in a meeting, then I always introduce myself with my pronoun, even if nobody else does. So sometimes that gets a little bit awkward, because then it's like, oh, well, even if I didn't say this time that I'm a trans guy or anything, like I feel like between that and the way that I look, like people all clearly know. But it also, I feel like, really opens a space for other people in the meeting to maybe give their pronouns, especially if I'm like one of the first people who's introducing, themselves. So that's also important to me too. So not only does it let everybody know like what my pronouns are, it also gives that space to maybe somebody else who may be considering it and wants to give their pronouns. So are there any other comments that anybody wants to say with this final question, or just in general, any last sort of comments or things we would like to say to our attendees? I wanted to say like final words, but that felt like really like, I don't know, grim. Like, here are the final words. If there's nothing else, I hope that you guys are seeing all the nice comments that are being made in the chat to all of us. So thank you right back at you guys who have been here asking questions and saying nice things in the chat.
So I'm jumping back on. This is Barbara. I just want to thank Wesley, Edward, Julian, Evelyn, and Grayson for sharing your story. I so much gratitude for all of you. As you know, this webinar has been recorded. And if we didn't get to your questions, feel free to email me and I will shoot it out to the panelists, and they will be happy to answer it for you. Good. Yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.